to the graduation, and he went up on the stage. They made a ramp. He went up on his wheelchair and received his diploma in his teeth.
There's people that we run across that, we sit back amazed, like, wow, like, but they're just incredible in everything that they do, you know. And sometimes, and most of the time we're amazed. Other times we're upset because it's just like, man, I can't even do this one thing, and you're doing all this other stuff, you know. And we ask for forgiveness for that, because sometimes we do. But then on the other side too is, you know, when we look at folks that, when we see the way God is living through them, it just amazes. You're like, wow, like you look and you think, I want that kind of relationship with God. Because you kind of see all these different things and just, you know, they may have a bad day, but you never realize it. Mm-hmm. You know, they may be going through difficult times, but you just never realize it. And you sit and you watch, and you're like, wow, like, look at what God continues to do through their life. Mm-hmm. And we just sit back, you know, amazed through it all. And that it just seems like it doesn't matter the circumstances, because, you know, we may go through an issue and we react in a certain way, mm-hmm. you know? And then I think early on in our walk with Christ that, you know, if you've had a bad temper, or, you know, you were used to responding to things in a certain way, that early walk with Christ, when something goes wrong, then sometimes like it just comes out naturally, and we got to catch ourselves saying, oh, wait a minute, I'm not that person anymore, mm-hmm. or so. And until now, you know, and you look at people thinking of, you just went through this, and like it didn't faze you. You're like, wow, like I want to be like that. And so, you know, and all that to say, you know, we continue on with the talking about Joseph, and want to look at Genesis chapter 39, and we look at Joseph because, you know, he's going on now being sold from slavery, and he goes on now to what takes place in his life. So Genesis chapter 39. Got it. So it says this: now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was with Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household and entrusted to his care everything he owned. All right, stop right there. All right, so remember back then, you know, we were talking about just about, you know, Egypt. Egypt is the place to be. It's like, it's got everything. Okay, so when famine hits, when you're in great need or so, Egypt was the place to go. That's where, you know, I can go and get whatever I need. I would think it's probably nowadays it's like Amazon, right? Nobody else has. What am I looking for? Amazon. You know, we go to Amazon looking. So it's kind of like that. You go there, and later on you'll see kind of when famine really hits, again, you see all that's happening in them heading to Egypt. So we see that he's purchased, he becomes a slave, and it's interesting because throughout Scripture, you have descriptions like this where slaves are purchased and, they're used for a task, whatever it may be. But then also there's other descriptions when they talk about slaves, it's as though as someone that they're not purchased, but it is basically, I'm struggling, living on my own or so I am going to now work for you. And they only work for so long with that person. They're listed as slaves, but it's only for a certain time. And it's also interesting that when you go through and you find that there's all these laws with it too. They're not to beat their slaves. They were, treat them in a certain way. So it is not, I say all that to say it's, when we think of the word, that phrase, that word slave today, and everything that's gone on is very different than what Scripture talks about slaves. Very different, very different. So he's brought over into his house, and what happens is that he notices, his master notices just how he is very different than anybody else. Very different. Realizes that everything that the task, everything that he's placing in Joseph's hands, he's just doing incredible. It's just, the way God is blessing, the way God is living, the way God is doing all these things for him is just, his master's realizing that, And it makes me think that, man, isn't this what the world needs to see? As we have surrendered our life to Christ, that God will live through us in such a way that no matter what we're doing, that people are realizing, man, you are so different. That everything that we do, it just seems like God is just blessing it. And I think I would dare to say that's what's missing so much in the world today. That could be the reason why, especially in the United States, Christianity is in a decline. That they say that more churches are closing than opening every year.